The Fields Effect, the Special Center Theory, by Dr. Alon Giladi.
Refutation move. I came, I saw, I refuted, and not relatively. I will now proceed to examine the formulas used in these experiments, namely the horizontal formula, delta t equals v squared, divided by 2 times c squared, and the vertical formula, delta t equals h times g, divided by c squared, which in a sidebar, of course, should be noted that the test is done using an atomic clock and the like, when according to Einstein, time flows and space expands or contracts regardless of the local physical aspect, as I will show you later. And in any case, this test shows us that on the one hand, the horizontal formula of these experiments, as will be explained and detailed, is exactly the same as the time component of Lorentz, but on the other hand, it is not required for Lorentz formulas on the subject of space, when according to Lorentz, we are in a combined physical matter, that is, someone who is supposedly inside the light within the framework of the horizontal arm of Michelson and Morley feels because of the ether, the contraction of his size, which was later interpreted after the removal of the ether by Einstein as a contraction of space, and also feels that the rhythm of the clock, due to the encounter with the ether, slows down. That is, the time supposedly according to Einstein after the ether goes out lengthens relative to the stationary observer, special relativity. It should be noted that the relatively accurate results of the time deviation in the traveling body, satellite/airplane, etc., compared to the stationary observer on Earth, are in accordance with the so-called Einstein combination of the vertical minus component, that is, slowing down the clock rate, lengthening of time, and the vertical plus, that is accelerating the clock rate, shortening of time due to moving away from the center of the space-time distortion due to the nearby star, the Earth. In any case, the accuracy of these results immediately shows that Lorentz's lack of consideration of the gravitational component, or, according to Einstein, the space-time distortion, was an error. But on the other hand, it can be noted here that he probably believed that there was no connection between the light wave and gravity, and therefore there was no need to consider the vertical component. In addition, with regard to the 2 arms that are facing each other, according to Michelson and Morley and horizontal to the Earth, we immediately see that Lorentz's space component does not accept any relation in the formulas and experiments that tested the time deviation, as if between the stationary observer and the traveler, and this is related to what I said before, that according to Einstein, and unlike Lorentz, there is no physical effect here, but a relative change of time and a relative change of space, both of which are a kind of geometric network that sustains the universe. Well, the first assumption is that here, in fact, a claim for a change in time is being physically tested, which is not a physical change, without considering and without testing the space component. This test, in addition to the time aspect, could have confirmed or refuted the claim for the existence of the theory of relativity in this matter. Here it is worth noting that Lorentz determined that the rate of a clock changes, that is, its rate slows down when it is in a body that is traveling at speed, and its internal space is shortened due to the effect of the ether. The ether dropped, and Einstein, without an intermediary physical factor, moved to pure mathematics without actual physics. That is, there is no actual physical effect of time, of space, on the clock in the traveling body, when according to Lorentz it is quite clear. And why? Because if there is a body moving at speed, and the ether slows it down uniformly, that is, the ether that is present throughout the universe uniformly meets with it, then it simultaneously affects both the slowing down of its hands and the contraction of the body of the clock, or another body, or its spatial interaction with another body, what Einstein called, without the ether, a shrinking space. Here, with Lorentz, he reduces his body because he opposes it, and he also necessarily simultaneously slows down the rate of his hands, etc. Therefore, according to Lorentz, the length physically changes simultaneously with the change in the rate component. Or in other words, the time that the mobile observer sees on his watch is equal to the time that the stationary observer sees on his watch multiplied by the Lorentz constant, which is 1 divided by the root of 1 minus v squared divided by c squared. In contrast, the length of the clock hand, or the space between it and another body for the traveling observer, is equal to the length that the stationary observer experiences divided by Lorentz's constant, namely, divided by 1 divided by the root of 1 minus v squared divided by c squared. And we see the physical logic here, namely, Lorentz believes that the force of the ether that acts uniformly on the clock moving at speed, that is, a certain distance divided by time, changes the rate of the clock in such a way that its size is compressed/contracted, and its rate therefore slows down. That is, the time it expresses lengthens. In contrast with Einstein, as soon as the ether has dropped, the rate on the satellite must be uniform, unchanging, while against the stationary one, there must be a deviation according to the formulas. And the same applies to space, which is not examined here according to the Lorentz formula, as the contraction or expansion of space itself, and not the traveling body, and this is the alphabet, meaning that there is no physical intermediary factor, ether, and it cannot be that the rate of the clock on the plane or on the satellite, that is, in the traveling body, will change as it was with Lorentz, but rather it must be uniform in itself and relative when tested against the rate of the stationary observer by the difference in deviation. And here, the convention believed that these experiments proved this because the atomic clocks before boarding the satellite are calibrated exactly according to the deviation expected according to the formulas, and when they are observed from Earth, the deviation is supposedly corrected. If it had not been corrected, then it would have been impossible to act on the GPS issue. We would have had extensive deviations. And of course, the same would have been true in the other experiments in relation to the two formulas according to their relevance in a specific experiment. And from this, the convention scientists concluded that it was a change in time relative to someone traveling on a satellite or a plane, etc., compared to the observer seemingly stationary on Earth, without changing the rate of the clock on the satellite relative to the satellite itself. And here, Dr. Giladi went to check whether they had checked the clock rate on the satellite itself, or on the plane, etc. That is, whether the rate on the satellite itself changes, or in other words, we get on the plane/satellite, see the rate of the clock before it goes into the air, then go into the air, and then check its rate again. Now, what does it turn out? It turns out that to Dr. Giladi's amazement, no experiment did this. They did not check whether there was a change in the rate of the clock on the satellite itself, nor did they check whether there was a change in space, which is not mentioned at all in these formulas. And we are talking about billions-dollar experiments here, about experiments that actually sought to prove the theory of relativity. It was simply possible to set up a non-electromagnetic clock to check whether the rate or the distance between its parts changes, and even more so to check physically on a satellite or spacecraft, whether the rate in an atomic clock changes and whether the distance between its parts, between the electron and the nucleus, changes, or whether they are constant. And what Dr. Giladi saw is that the explanations there were that Einstein said that the rate on the satellite is necessarily constant, meaning that the understanding of convention is axiomatic, and therefore there is no need to check. How much more so with regard to what is called space contraction, or the distance between the parts of the clock, etc. Do you understand? Einstein said, I would say the guru. Einstein said, then there is no need to check. He said that this is the theory of relativity, and that's it. This is how conventional science proves the most important theory, together with quantum theory, the most important theory on which all modern physics is based. That is, Einstein said, period. If and when they see that the rate is not uniform on the satellite and the deviation is found on the satellite, or that the magnitude or the distance between the parts of the clock changes, then Einstein falls immediately and there is no relativity. And how do they actually see the calibration system? That is, the proof of the deviation of time, the relativity of time from their point of view. What they see is the correction of the deviation due to the calibration according to the connection of the horizontal and vertical formula. And this is done using an electromagnetic beam that comes out of the satellite, from the atomic clock on the satellite at the speed of light, and passes to the collection point, the reception on Earth. That is, according to the convention in these experiments, the satellite's clock is measured on Earth using the beam that is transmitted from it to Earth at the speed of light. Or in other words, the beam comes out of the atomic clock and shows a deviation exactly according to the current measurement options, exactly according to the formula in values of nanoseconds in its time component only, and of course they do not check the space, but only the time component. But when Dr. Giladi observed these experiments in an exemplary manner, what did he saw? What will you see now? What we see is that in fact on Earth, they do not check the atomic clock, but check the electromagnetic beam that came out of it. The test is of the beam, and therefore the conclusions you will see here, as a result of this correct observation, are unequivocal conclusions. Einstein fell. There is no relativity. As mentioned, when we observe the horizontal component, we actually see Lorentz in terms of time. That we observe Lorentz in terms of time, we know that after removing the ether, the expression of time for the traveler changes according to the time of the stationary observer multiplied by Lorentz's constant. Lorentz's constant is 1 divided by the root of 1 minus v squared divided by c squared. What happens when we place c squared on the v squared? What happens is that we are actually at 1 divided by 0. That is, there are different claims here on how to relate exactly to 1 divided by 0. That is, 1 divided by 0 multiplied by the time of the stationary observer. Some claims that it is an undefined number, some claims that it is infinity. In my opinion, these claims are wrong. If we look from the perspective of the one, then in fact we can claim that the changing time is equal to the time of the stationary one. But without going into formulas right now, in this situation, according to Einstein, the formula is not relevant to light that has no mass. It is relevant to mass. It is not relevant to light that has no mass, or to speeds above the speed of light. After all, if we put in this formula, the Lorentz constant on which Einstein bases the special relativity, if we put here a speed that is higher than the speed of light, then we will be in general an irrational or unreal number, that is, 1 divided by the minus root of something. But in any case, what is clear, and we are currently examining whether these experiments confirmed the theory of relativity, or irrelevant to the theory of relativity, or whether they refuted the theory of relativity. In any case, we are in Einstein, and according to Einstein, and also according to all current scientific physical convention, there is no doubt that time, so to speak, freezes within the race of the electromagnetic ray, at the speed of light of the electromagnetic ray, from the point where it began to the point where it is absorbed. When we look at Andromeda, the light coming from Andromeda takes a picture for us of exactly what happened there about 2.5 million years ago. In other words, we see what happened exactly 2.5 million years ago. In other words, the electromagnetic ray takes a picture for us of exactly what happened from the moment it came out, until it reached us. And so, since we receive the same electromagnetic beam from the satellite, from the atomic clock on the satellite, and we receive from it a change in the rate of the atomic clock exactly according to the formula, exactly according to the combination of the vertical formula and the horizontal formula, because that is why they were calibrated on the ground. This is conclusive proof that the atomic clock on the satellite changed its rate, and its rate was not constant, as it had to be according to Einstein. This is proof beyond any doubt. We know that the theory of relativity does not work, neither in the small dimensions nor in the large dimensions of the universe, but this is proof against the experiments that the convention claimed to prove it, and they do not prove it. But not only do they not prove it, not only do they not confirm it, they themselves refutes the special and general theories of relativity. Moreover, this is proof that Lorentz was right about the horizontal component, and it is also clear why, because the change in the clock's rate is the result of some external factor. It is not the ether, but it is another factor that simultaneously affects the physical matter of changing the size and rate of the clock if we are at a higher speed than the stationary observer, or in other words, simultaneous physical effect on the slowing down of the electron's rate inside the atomic clock compared to the nucleus, which supposedly shows us time that is lengthening. And on the other hand, it is a simultaneous physical effect on the distance between it and the nucleus, which is shortening. And this is exactly Lorentz, and this is really not Einstein. In other words, Lorentz's statement of a simultaneous physical connection between the rate and the size is in itself a correct statement. Similarly, the calculation of the rate by means of what is attributed to the horizontal formula in itself is correct. What is not correct with Lorentz is the existence of the ether, and is the lack of consideration of the vertical component, gravity, according to his method, or space-time distortion, according to Einstein. But in terms of simultaneity and the time component in itself, it is a correct statement because it is a physical observation according to the laws of nature. But Einstein's observation, the mathematical observation that distinguishes between the physical matter and the abstract mathematical matter of changing time, flowing time, relative time without direct physical influence of particles and forces, etc. That observation of Einstein is a completely wrong observation. We have laws of nature here, we have physics here. The meeting of the electron, opposite the nucleus in something else, not with the ether, but in something else, as will be explained shortly. We do not have a universe of space-time here. We do not have relative time and relative space here without a direct connection of natural laws to the physics of materials and proofs. We have here a network of fields within the framework of the theory of the center, within the framework of the principle according to which there is no field without a particle, and there is no particle without a field.